Sensors?
Work's a strong phrase.
Maybe you just hadn't paid the phone bill.
Great, I'm really loving it.
More than my life's worth not to...
It can be quite a shock to the system.
Hello and welcome to the Safety Podcast, the podcast where we talk about all things safety at RWErenewables. My name's Neil, and today we're going to be looking at switch room safety. And seeing as they were such a big hit on the general safety podcast, I've decided to welcome back Becky, who's a newbie on the block, and Jim, who's an old hand at this, aren't you, Jim? Hello, both of you.
Hi.
Hey again.
So, Becky, last time you were with us, you just finished your first shift, but you've been with us for a while now, is that right?
Yes, I've been up to all sorts of tasks since we did the general safety podcast.
Oh, great. And how's it going?
Great, I'm really loving it.
Oh, that's good to hear. And how's she settling in, Jim?
Oh, very keen. She's keeping me on my toes, I'll tell you.
Well, I'm catching up with you both today, as I heard you mention accessing high and low voltage switch rooms and the need for switch room safety. Now, this isn't something I'm familiar with, so I just wanted to find out more about it.
Fire away.
Well, I was a bit confused, as I thought that you only worked on the wind turbines.
Work's a strong phrase.
Easy. Yes, although I work on the wind turbine part of the system, the design of some turbines means we can be exposed to high voltage switchgear or other apparatus.
For instance, on this site, there's high voltage switchgear on the entrance level as soon as we come through the main door. So we need to be aware of the hazards.
All right, so it sounds like something that would come under your general safety checklist.
Well remembered. Yeah, the safe access and egress part of Tampa means that we have to take into account the state of any electrical apparatus that we may be working near or passing by on our way to the work area.
So, what kind of things are you looking for? Is it just how the equipment looks?
That's certainly part of it, but it starts before you've even opened the door.
What do you mean?
Well, take today's work, for example. We were tasked with investigating a fault on a turbine that we'd lost communication with.
We didn't know what state the turbine was in, except that it wasn't running.
Maybe you just hadn't paid the phone bill.
If only it was that simple.
We headed out to the turbine, but before we entered, we had to check for any signs of forced entry.
There might have been some unauthorised access to the turbine.
The turbines are usually locked up, aren't they? Jim, I've seen you with your bunches of keys.
Yeah, the turbines need to be kept secure to prevent members of the public wandering in and out, but also to prevent damage or theft. But that doesn't mean people don't try occasionally. Fortunately, we couldn't see any signs of attempted entry.
Okay, so then you're good to go in?
Not just yet. Some sites or areas have fire suppression or arc detection systems that may need to be deactivated before entering.
You don't want those going off when you're in there.
Exactly. These systems aren't installed on this site, so we didn't need to take this into account. But we did look at the vents and door frame for any evidence of smoke. We also checked if the door was warm to the touch.
So, you're seeing if there's evidence of a fire?
That's right. We need to do everything we can to ensure it's safe to enter before opening the door.
What if there are signs of forced entry or a possible fire? What do you do then?
We'd alert the control room to prevent any further access until it could be investigated by a specialist team.
Now we could enter the workspace, but we still had to take precautions as we went in. First, we opened the door a fraction and used our senses to get an idea of conditions in there.
Sensors? What are you checking for?
So we listened out for crackling sounds and checked that there wasn't a smell of ozone. See, either of these can indicate the presence of electrical arcs.
Also, smells like burnt plastic can indicate an electrical fire, and the smell of rotten eggs could indicate the presence of decomposed SF6 gas.
SF what?
SF6 gas. It's used in some switchgear to reduce arc flash. It's inert and has no smell, but if it's been exposed to an electrical arc, then it will smell of rotten eggs. So if you smell it, you shouldn't enter the space as the risk of electrical arc will be high.
But not all types of switchgear have SF6.
Some have a vacuum and others may have an air gap. Your site representative will detail what to look for. It could be an alarm or a gauge to monitor. Sometimes this can also be checked remotely. As part of general safety, you should know what type you have on your site so you know what to look for.
Once we're happy that we can't hear or smell anything untoward, we can enter.
We look for any alarms on the protection relay or any signs of deformity of the unit itself. If the switchgear has an SF6 gauge, we check that to make sure it is in the green. This indicates that it has the correct level of SF6 for the unit to operate safely.
We'll keep checking what we can hear and smell while we're near the equipment. This is us actively maintaining a safe method of work.
Which is part of your general safety responsibilities.
That's right. If we find any damage or cause for concern, we alert the control room and leave the turbine.
So is there anything else we should be aware of when accessing the area near high voltage switchgear?
A lot of the equipment is automatically or remotely controlled. This means any problem on the network could result in something operating while we're in there.
When nearby switchgear operates without warning, it can be quite a shock to the system. But if this happens or you find any other problem with the switchgear, you should leave the turbine and alert the control room, who will contact our high voltage colleagues.
They'll be able to isolate the switchgear from further up the circuit, so no one is in the vicinity when it's de-energized.
If there's an issue with the turbine itself and you need to remove the electricity supply to it in an emergency, you can activate the emergency trip or stop.
So activate this if there's an issue with the turbine, but not if there's an issue with the switchgear itself.
Definitely not. We can't predict how the switchgear would react if it was tripped, so if there's a problem with it, leave the turbine and alert the control room. But one thing to remember is that the trip buttons are often in a place where they could be easily knocked, so we need to be aware of our movements at all times.
I've come close to accidentally catching one or two before.
It was the early days. I mean, you're more aware now.
So do these checks only apply to the turbines?
No, some turbines have external kiosks that house the switchgear or transformer, and we have to apply the same principles when accessing them.
We also have to follow the same procedures when we're accessing switch rooms back at the substation. Right, time to test you. So if we were accessing a switch room, what would we look for or check?
Let me think. Well, we'd confirm that we were at the correct location and we'd check the door for signs of unauthorised access.
Go on.
We'd look for any evidence of a fire or overheating, things like smoke from the vents or the door handle being hot.
And then what?
We'd open the door slightly and check for any sounds and smells that could indicate that something's not right.
Once we've confirmed all is good,
Well, then we would enter and look over the switchgear for any signs of distress or failure.
Taking particular care over?
Any gauges for SF6 or protection relays.
Good. You were listening.
More than my life's worth not to. How about if there are other pieces of equipment in the switch room, like a transformer or other high voltage apparatus? Anything you need to check on them?
Well, if we were entering a room with a transformer, we'd follow the same procedure, but we would instantly notice the sound of the transformer humming away.
And that's normal?
yes, but if you're unsure, get someone else to listen to it, perhaps high voltage colleagues. And you should do a visual check on the transformer to see if there are any areas of distress or deformation.
And you need to check for leaks as well.
Leaks?
Yeah, if the transformer is oil filled, then the oil is the insulator. If this is leaked out from the transformer, it could be in a dangerous state.
Well, I guess it's easy to spot oil on the floor.
Well, the oil might leak out onto the floor, but if the transformer is in the bund or an area that's hard to see, any leaks won't be so easy to spot. What you can do is check the sight glass on the side of the transformer. This shows the oil level so you can see if it's lower than it should be, which would suggest a leak. If there's anything though you're not sure about, check with the site personnel who can advise you.
Sounds like a lot to remember, but I suppose it comes as second nature to you.
A lot of it is common sense. It's not normal to have loads of oil on the floor, so if we spot some, we investigate immediately, as it could indicate a serious and dangerous situation.
One thing to remember is that transformers aren't always housed in buildings. We have them in compounds on some of our sites. For instance, on this site there's a large fenced area with a transformer inside. We wouldn't normally have access to it unless we have permission from our high voltage colleagues, but if you're part of a working party in there, you need to know where you can and can't go and what to look out for in the compound.
The working party leader will have a document detailing what you can do in the compound and where you can go. They'll also go through the safe method of work with you, which will take any conditions in the compound into account.
And what could those be?
Your work might mean you have to go through the compound with a ladder, so the safety document will instruct you not to hold it above a certain height.
In case it touched those? What are they? Cables?
Buzz bars, yes. These could be live, so it's imperative that we follow any instructions on the safety document and keep to the areas that are demarcated as safe.
And I guess if you're working in high voltage areas, then there are a set of safety documents and responsibilities that you need to be aware of.
That's right, yeah, but probably best to leave that to another podcast there.
Sounds like a plan. I'll hold you to that.
I'll be off that week.
Oh, we'll wait for you.
So, that's about it then, I guess.
One last thing. When leaving any areas or rooms with high voltage equipment, make sure they are locked and secured.
We have a legal responsibility to prevent anyone accessing them who isn't authorised to do so.
Again, this makes sense. You're keeping people safe.
It's what we're here for.
Safety all the way. And that means you can both head on home after another safe day working at RWErenewables. Anyway, thank you so much for coming and talking to us today about keeping yourselves and others safe in a switch room environment.
No problem.
Always happy to have a safety conversation.
For more information about switch room safety, see your supervisor or your site representative. Enjoy your own safe work practices and keep your eyes open for more safety talk on the RWE Safety Podcast.